Coming through with the strength in you. Dun 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 dun. Coming through with the strength in you. Yeah, you. Hey, coming through with the strength in you. What it do, boo? Coming through with the strength in you. You made it. Good job. Strength in you. Coming through. Strength in you. Coming through. Hey, boo. Hey, woo, woo, woo. Happy Monday. We made it. We made it through the weekend. Let me bring the king in on the scene real quick on the team. Boo.
Yo, I got caught up guard. I was trying to put my there we go. I'm trying to put my phone on do not disturb because I was like, this would be the episode. But how is everybody doing? Welcome to Strength and You. I'm your boy Wisdom, as always. Oh, God. As always, my beautiful host, Mrs. Strength. How are you doing?
I am great and I'm excited for this show today. Y'all don't even know. See, this is a topic that a lot of people don't talk about and it's kind of taboo, but we ain't scared. So since we fearless, I'm just ready to talk about this good old topic of sex because that's how we all get here. Love you too, Sugarfoot Sweet Face. But y'all know we usually come at you with segments and all kind of stuff. But because we have a special guest today, I am gonna hit you with the switch up. Ain't gonna be none of the segments. We just about to come in with the flavor. So let me bring in my guest real quick, y'all, because I'm excited. I'm excited.
Hey, how you
How
doing?
you doing,
Hey,
Sugarfoot, Mr. Kelvin Pace?
welcome to the show, Mr. Kevin Pace. How you doing?
Pretty well, doing good.
Good to
I'm
see you.
so
Good to see you.
I'm so
Yeah.
honored that you are here. I'm excited for this whole conversation because like I said, everybody's scared to talk about the thing that got all of us here, which is sex. But I love to talk about it. So
Yeah, you do.
I'm excited about this conversation, y'all. But let me tell you. So I met Mr. Kelvin recently, so he is new to me just like he is to you. But he is licensed. He graduated as a with a master's in clinical psychology from the University of Alaska, Anchorage in 2009. And Mr. Kelvin owns Case Space Counseling LLC, where he serves clients in private practice, and he also does contract work with Full Spectrum Health as a behavioral health clinician. I say
Yeah.
words messed up sometimes. where he works with the integra- where he works in an integrated care team delivering evidence-based care to persons of the LGBTQ plus community. Welcome, 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 welcome. I'm excited for you. And also, don't let me forget, don't let me leave nothing out. He also provides services to couples and individuals dealing with their sexual or their relationship issues that include low desire, anxiety around sex, and infidelity. His current focus is on mindfulness based interventions to marriage sexual concerns, and he works with persons that are either in or looking to explore non-traditional relationship orientations that fall under the umbrella of consensual, ethical, or non-monogamy. Yes, this is about to be so fun. Yes, yes, yes. So, first and foremost, like I said, welcome.
It's a pleasure.
It is a pleasure. And before I just dive into my questions, Mr. Wisdom, is there anything you would like to say to Mr.
Yeah,
Kelvin?
I want to start off by saying thank you for joining the show. Actually, I want to leave the floor to you and ask you what got you into your profession that you are in today.
Oh yeah. It was a long journey, long road. I was in the army a long time ago, and I
Thank
was
you for your service.
thank you. And I was a medic, and as a young soldier, I know everybody was talking about sex, having sex, but we didn't know nothing about sex at all. And when I got stationed in Alaska at in Anchorage at J Bear, a lot of my soldiers, as a medic, started asking me questions about sex, and the only thing I knew was from I'm gonna date myself now was from Love Line and Sex for Dummies. So I figured I need to learn a little bit more. And then I saw this great show called Berman and Berman. It was about two sisters that, out of Chicago that did sex therapy. And I got to preface this part. I was born Southern, or not born, but my family was a Southern Baptist. My wife's Catholic. And so when I told my wife, I said, hey, I want to be a sex therapist, she touched me on the shoulder. She said, babe, I'll support you, whatever you want to do, but don't ever tell our parents that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then after that, I went to school. I got my master's degree in clinical psychology, but there wasn't a whole lot of information on how to become a sex therapist out there, or not a lot of people to connect with that knew on how to become a sex therapist, except for one of my professors and a couple of sex therapists that were already in town. I connected with them and did some further training after school, after college, to become a sex certified. And I finally became certified in 2017. So it was a long route, but
Yeah,
it was
you
well
got
worth
there
it.
eventually.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I went to ask you. Like, what are some common misconceptions when it comes to your field of study? Like when you hear sex therapist, like you automatically get these thoughts in your head. What are some of the common ones that you deal with on a daily?
Oh, that we have sex with people.
That was the one I was thinking about, but I was
Yeah,
like, let me,
yeah, yeah. In order to be a sex therapist, you have to have a mental health degree or behavioral degree and be licensed. So we're therapists first that get specialized in sex therapy.
Mm,
And it's funny because no one ever asks, like, hey, you're a trauma therapist or an art therapist, you know.
Right.
But as sex therapist, you're like, oh, you have sex with people.
yeah, yeah.
You want to show me how to do stuff and give me instructions? Nah, I ain't trying to go to jail.
Where did you grow up?
A little bit everywhere. So I'm originally from Americus, Georgia, but my dad was in the military, so we
Mm.
traveled all around. Spent some time in Georgia and Germany, and also
Oh, wow.
Oklahoma.
Okay,
So
okay.
yeah.
That's cool. Awesome, awesome. But okay, so I want to just get right into it because as a stroke survivor, me personally, I deal with anxiety around sex because I don't know how to be sexy anymore with with limited use of my body.
Mhm.
So I don't know how to get out of my own head, I guess you can say.
Yeah, and it's ingrained into us not to be sexy for a long time unless we're listening to the entertainment or the music industry or what have you. Because starting from our sexual education, it's more about penis, vagina, baby, STIs, or it's going to kill you, and that's all you get. But you don't learn about pleasure and what pleasure really means to the human being, and just through touch. And even through our social spaces, through religion, we're taught about pleasure is not a good thing.
Hmm.
If you eat this, or if you overindulge, or if you do these certain things, then it's a sin, or um, you're not living the right way. And so when it comes to our bodies, we talk about sex as something that it can be overindulgent if you have too much sex. But who gets to have too much sex, right?
Right.
The person you're having more sex than. They the ones that say
Exactly.
having too much sex. So, but if we step back and look at pleasure, erotic pleasure outside of our genitalia,
Right.
then it creates a space for us to be able to look beyond um, our physical capabilities to enjoy erotic and sexual pleasure.
Hmm.
It makes
So
sense.
I wanted to ask you, so when it comes to that, is that like a common thread with like not only people with disabilities, but just regular average people like getting in their head and overthinking things?
Oh, 100%. One of the major things that I work with is anxiety and having people not being able to get into their bodies and to be present through sexual intercourse. And so, um, because we're thinking about things, we're thinking about height, weight, penis size, all these different things under the rainbow that keeps us from experiencing pleasure.
Right.
Yeah.
How would you tell somebody who experiences a lot of anxiety when it comes to sex? What would your advice be for them?
There are some, well, one, find a sex therapist. And two, read some books. There's some great books out there about the mindfulness way through sex and how to get back into our bodies. Because a lot of time our bodies can betray us. And we get into this position of where we don't feel sexy anymore. We're not connected with our bodies because our bodies can be vessels for so much trauma, but also our bodies can be a vessel for pleasure as well. And so when we get back into our bodies, we can start to look at that part of us that's about pleasure, where it doesn't have to center on the genitalia. So we can move into what my arms and hands feel like. Can I experience pleasure through that? When I'm touching my partner, am I getting pleasure from touching my partner in this way? And so really focusing on our own senses.
That makes sense. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually. But I think a lot of people are scared to explore it, even like monogamy, you know what I mean? Or polygamy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's scary to explore it because a lot of times we always are, well, at times we're trying to anticipate what our partners want from us. If I dress up sexy and I touch my partner and I kiss them on their neck or I kiss them on the ear, they're going to want to have sex right then and there, penile vaginal intercourse. And that's not always the case.
Right.
A lot of times we can just be sexy, erotic, do sexy, erotic touching, and it doesn't have to lead to the bedroom. And when we go this route, we call this non-demand touch or non-goal oriented touch, where we're not touching for the goal of sex, but we're touching for the goal of, or not even for a goal. We're just touching because we're interested in touching. We're touching because we're interested in being sexy.
Right.
And if it leads to the bedroom, yay. If it doesn't, that's cool too.
Right. So would you say though that it's probably easier to start with yourself and touching yourself and loving yourself and embracing you instead of that sex from another person? You know what I mean?
It's depending. If you have a safe person that can hold space where you two can explore each other, that's amazing. Especially if you guys can sit down and just have sessions where we're just touching, eye gazing, breathing with each other, and not even moving to the genitalia, and just learning what you like and what you like about yourself or what you're interested in through touch is amazing. But if you don't have that partner, it's great to start off by yourself because sometimes even that is taboo. What is it like for me to go into the bedroom, lie down, and explore my body? And you know what? This time I'm not going to explore my penis or my vulva or my clitoris. I'm just going to explore everything else on my body. And what if I let out a moan because I like the way my arm touched or my arm felt, right? We are shy about doing that as people. Will I seem, will be like, hey, will I seem weird if I'm getting stimulation from a different part of my body?
Yeah. I could see me thinking something like that, to be honest, because I couldn't get out of my own head thinking something like that's weird if I'm just in there with myself,
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be. But I think because people like myself don't feel sexy to somebody else, then it's easy just to not even try to do nothing.
Yeah. And we, a lot of times we call this, we go into avoidance. So we have that anxiety flares up. Like, will people find me sexy after this? What's going to happen? Am I still going to be able to explore pleasure? Am I going to be able to give pleasure to other people? And then after a while, after that anxiety becomes so burdensome, we just move into avoidance and start to avoid sex altogether.
Mm.
And what would you say to somebody whose main goal is only sex and they just searching and seeking for sex?
Well, I say kudos. Right? Good on you. And then it's about more of approaching it with curiosity, right? So there's two ways. Well, there's thoughts and emotions. We can be anxious people, that's an emotion, but thoughts perpetuate anxiety. And those thoughts are, if they start with what if, then we start going down that anxiety spiral. What if they don't like me? What if they don't? And to avoid that spiral, we change that thought to curiosity. Huh. I wonder how many times can I come today?
Okay.
I'm interested in figuring that out. I'm interested in figuring out how I get my body to work for me today.
That's interesting. That's good. So, as a female, most women I hear they never have an orgasm.
Mhm.
And do you think that is because they don't have that curiosity, that wonder that you was just talking about?
It's a lot of things combined into that, a lot of social factors and also a lot of education factors in there. A lot of folks that I come into, they don't realize that 89% of women primarily orgasm through clitoral stimulation. And so, but we don't teach that. We don't teach
Right.
that this beautiful part of the body, the clitoris, has 10,000 nerve endings. And the only function of the clitoris is to bring pleasure. That's the only function. And so we don't touch it, we don't go near it. We kind of shy away from it. And then we think that our orgasms have to match what everybody else on TV's orgasms are or what's in porn. Did we have this explosive orgasm in the house cam shaking down? Well, a lot of people are having orgasms, but they're not recognizing them as orgasms either
Mm.
because they have this expectation of what it's supposed to look like.
Right. Okay.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And harkening back to what you said earlier, as a man
Mhm.
and exploring your own body, sometimes we have this stigma that's surrounded with we don't do that, we don't do that, we don't touch this, we don't touch that. That's not supposed to feel good.
Yeah.
What's a way, as a guy, for us to kind of get over that stigma? What would you suggest moving forward?
Tap into who you are as a sexual being. And this is for everyone because we tend to leave out the fact that we are sexual beings. We're moms, dads, brothers, sisters, workers. We have all of these labels that we label for each other, but we rarely label ourselves as sexual beings. When we can start to tap into who we are as a sexual being and integrate that into who we are on a day-to-day basis, then the more times we can go in and say, you know what? No, this feels good. If I'm masturbating and I'm playing with my nipples and it made me orgasm a lot harder, okay, let me keep a note. That's a part of who I am as a sexual being. And I'm not going to be embarrassed about it because it's my body.
Mm.
Okay. So, so for me,
Mhm.
I have teenage boys,
Uh-huh.
and I think it's healthy for them to go and masturbate if that's what they need to do.
Yeah.
And but it's being taught that it's like Wisdom said that it's a bad thing to do. Is it wrong for me to tell them that this is a healthy thing to do?
No, it's not a wrong thing at all. When we, you know, couple of things like the priority of the conversation with all teenagers and is consent. And
Right.
we educate consent and even consent with masturbation because sometimes like, hey, is it appropriate to masturbate in these spaces because other people didn't consent to watch, right?
Right.
So we go through that consent space and then we talk about what's pleasurable. Now, the measure of pleasurability or how many times should we be masturbating, that's dependent on you. A lot of times we look at, is it interfering with your work, going to school, living a functional life? Then I would say, okay, we have a problem with masturbation. But if we're using it to explore pleasure, to reduce stress and to do all these other things. And we're doing it in an appropriate space and time where it's not interfering with our day-to-day functioning. Have at it. Enjoy yourself and take proper precautions. And what I mean by proper precautions is guys don't think about using lube. You know, when I was growing up, it's always like, go get the Vaseline or the lotion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go to the store, get you some lube, enjoy some lube, have fun with your body, because if you're masturbating to the point that you're hurting yourself, then that can also be a problem as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, going back to what you just said there, when I was introduced to lube for the first time, I was like a whole new world opened up to me, and I was like, "Oh, we
Yeah.
could use this," because I grew up on lotion, and
Yeah.
you had your little time, but once you had lubrication involved, it was like so much easier. And when I was younger, I did hurt myself.
Mhm.
Either
Yeah.
just trying to run one out quick or whatever the case was.
Yeah.
And introducing those things, I think it's a benefactor for a good cause moving forward. And I will also want to ask you, is it becoming easier as time has gone on? We live in a different time now,
Mhm.
so do you find it's easier to have these kind of conversations with the partner or a client or whatever?
For me personally, do I think it's a great if it's easier for me? Yes. But society, our kids are kind of pushed up against the wall about the information that we've getting because of the, like I said, I'm gonna harp on this a lot. The lack of education in our school systems force people to get education somewhere
Mm-hmm.
else. And so, like for young men that are talking about masturbation, I mean, I saw a therapist on TikTok one time. He said, if you masturbate, you're weak. You're a very weak man. And this is a therapist. And so I'm like, no, that's not the message that we need to be sending to young people.
No.
Um, when as people are exploring our own bodies, we also have to realize that our partners do not own our bodies or pleasure.
Hmm.
So I hear a lot of things of like, hey, why are you masturbating in the room? You could have been having sex with me, and that's my orgasm. No, it ain't. It's not even close to yours. Slavery ended. I'm not your
Fact.
yes, I'm not here or sent on this earth to make sure that I pleasure you and I cannot enjoy my own pleasure. So we're going down these deep tunnels that are like reinforcing shame and stigma about personal pleasure with our young men and young women. So I really try to get kids or young adults to a place of where they can learn healthy
Mm.
information.
I like that. And I think it's a very important, especially that they're educated properly and not shamed for what's natural. This is nature.
Yeah,
So it's supposed to be a beautiful thing and not something that's like, oh my God.
exactly.
But so also though, I know just the pleasure part of it. How do you find that besides just books or um exploring?
And so a lot of times you can go into well, one, exploring your body, but also getting with a good therapist that's sex positive, that will help you on your journey to give you ideas about which way to go. So looking at toys, looking at sex furniture, if you're having partnered sex, sex furniture is amazing for all bodied people, but it gives us access to positions that we may not have had if we have a disability, if we're not able bodied. So it can, the Liberator, they make sex furniture. The great product, really expensive. So there's other products out there that do the same thing where like if you are older like me and jumped out of planes in the military and your knees don't work the right way, you know, the liberator gives opportunities to put into different positions that may be comfortable.
I'm gonna have to look into that situation.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's real. And as a stroke survivor, I'm limited. You know what I mean? But I want to do stuff. But how do I figure it out? So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and you go on their website, they got all the positions you can do in their
Find out.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Somebody said they didn't experience self-masturbation until it was necessary during the second marriage. However, I walked in on others jerking off while watching porn.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes we won't get into, and that's not an uncommon story of where we won't get into masturbation or self-pleasure or understanding our own bodies until later in age. And it's an awakening, and some people find it and they're just like, man, this is amazing. I can go into this space and I can enjoy myself. And but it's a lot of the societal taboos that we've placed on self-pleasure.
Mm.
Yeah. And what would you say, since you're a therapist, what would you say to somebody who wanted to bring in a third person in their relationship?
So there's a lot of different spaces around this, because some people would say, hey, we are monogamous, but we want to experiment with another person in our bedroom. Does that affect our monogamous? We're like, kind of monogamish, but they may say, hey, it may be a one-time thing. So we talk about communication, having both parties or all three parties really consenting to this and exploring this. And then communicating about the things that you may not think that may come up. What are your boundaries? Mm-hmm. And boundaries are different from rules, because rules keep the system safe. Boundaries keep us safe.
Right.
Right. And so we want to talk about our boundaries as a couple, the person that we're inviting, they're humans. They're not objects.
Right.
So we want to talk about their boundaries and just have a candid discussion of the expectations. I know the glorified way is to say, hey, we're going to go drinks at the bar and then come home and bring somebody home and we're all having drinks and no one's discussed anything. But then feelings come up in this. And and sometimes you can ruin the experience. Other times I've had couples say, this is an amazing experience, but we did it once. We're good. So we're going to move on from it. And other couples say, hey, this is an amazing experience, and we're going to see if we can expand or to find more. So the main thing is communication, talking about the things that you may not have thought about talking about before.
Okay. That makes sense.
I had a question here. Mm-hmm. What is like the easy starter for a couple to have a difficult sexual conversation?
Yeah, so that's another thing that I specialize in is sexual communication. Just to give you some numbers real quick. Mm-hmm. Us as therapists, we're taught that if we teach general communication skills in relationships, that automatically this should bleed over into the sex, and that should be better. That's not what happened. When we teach great general communication skills, what we saw is that the couples did have a greater relationship satisfaction. When we started teaching couples how to have to increase their skills in sexual communication, not only did their relationship satisfaction went up, but their sexual satisfaction went up at the same time. For men that had great sexual communication skills, they saw a frequency in sex. For women that had great sexual communication skills, they saw more frequencies in orgasm. So we really want to lean into sexual communication. And a lot of times we enter our sexual communication. Well, first thing we have to do is schedule time for it. It shouldn't just be something off the cuff, and it should be a priority. When we put it in our calendar, it has to be something we recognize and is just as important as everything else in our calendar. 2, when we come into these conversations, coming into it with a positive attitude. Mm-hmm. is the most important, because if I come in there and I come in whining, I'm like, oh baby, we ain't had sex in like 2 months. Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear the whining and all of that. What we do want to hear is, hey, you remember that time when we had this optimal sexual moment and it was crazy? We were having sex like 3 times a day. This was awesome. I'm curious if we can get back there again. And so now going back to that place of curiosity and asking, hey, how do you think we can get there again? What do you think about it? Can we do it? Right. So that's the first piece of getting in there. And then the second piece of entering into our sexual conversations is to talk about our own desires, wants, and needs. And then as the listener, not yucking what our partner wants.
Right.
Right. And then to keep it up, to make it consistent, because we'll mess it up every time we do it.
Right.
Yeah. So, and just because it doesn't go right the first time, give us some space, breathe, and try it again, and we'll eventually get better.
And where would you go to get better with your sexual communication?
So sexual communication skills, defined as just being really sexually confident in being able to talk about what you need. So if we go all the way, into the beginning of this conversation of touching your own body, figuring out what you like, figuring out what you don't like, figuring out what you're interested in, that builds sexual confidence. And if our partners are a safe space to talk, if there's a safe space where we can explore these things, and I can come up to my partner and be like, hey, you know what? Last time I was masturbating by myself, man, I figured out that I like my earlobe twitched when I'm stroking, right? Isn't that pretty cool? Yeah. You want to give it a try with me?
Okay.
Right. And so it's that confidence to be able to offer that safe space where my partner is going to be like, what? You were masturbating and you touched your ear?
Right.
You're weird. Leave me alone. I don't want to talk about it. Then we're not going to talk about it. We're not going to build that confidence.
Mm-hmm. So for a person who has zero confidence and they're trying to build up,
start with your own body. Learn your own body. Learn about your own pleasure. Learn where that comes from. If you're a vulva owner and you go into a sex toy shop, talk to them. Talk to the people. They're very knowledgeable. They know about the toys. Go online, look at some of these toy reviewers, figure out what's good for your body. Some people don't need a $200 vibrator. A lot of people can just be like, oh, here's a little bullet for $15. And that gets me going. And so now I can communicate with my partner about my likes, wants, or needs. Or if we're reading Zane, and we find some sexy parts and we're like, I want to try that. Having that confidence to come to your partner. But it's going to be mainly, though, if your partner's offering that safe space. I can't reiterate that enough, because if my fantasy is, hey babe, I'd like to try a threesome, and they say, oh, you just want other people, then I'm not going to feel safe enough to talk to you about it anymore.
Right.
Right. I'm just going to walk away and just be like, okay, whatever. She's not the person I can talk to about these issues or what turns me on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you had mentioned sex toys. And I remember the first time I went to an adult shop, it was kind of overwhelming, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
What's a good way to kind of introduce yourself to toys and that side of sexual experience?
Yeah. So a lot of things is getting a lot of terminology down, right? There's a difference between a vibrator and a dildo, and then there's vibrating dildos as well. And they all don't have the same function. And so doing a little research online, figuring out what you're looking for, because not all women only orgasm through clitoral stimulation. There's other ways that they are stimulated through the G-spot, anal penetration, breast penetration for men. There are masturbation sleeves that we can use, and then there's also prostate massagers that we can use to get men off as well. And so just trying to figure out those things that are right for your body, and then like I said, talking to the staff to try to figure out what's appropriate for you.
You got me excited real quick because you mentioned something that most men are scared of, which is their prostate.
Yeah.
And they don't want you to touch it because they feel like now that makes me gay. But it's like we're overly focused on the wrong thing. If your pleasure comes in that area, then it is what it is. So what would you say to somebody who's struggling with letting somebody go touch their prostate?
So a couple of things. So gender identity is who we identify on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
Gender expression is how we show how we identify. Sexual orientation is who we can be romantically and sexually connected to. Sex is a behavior,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and what I mean by that is just because you enjoy prostate stimulation doesn't mean you're sexually and romantically attracted to same-sex partners. This is just pleasurable because this is sex. I'm touching something, I'm going into my pleasure space. So it doesn't mean you're gay. It means you enjoy pleasure.
Say that one more time for the people in the back.
Doesn't mean you're gay. You enjoy pleasure. And there are a lot of men that'll say, hey, I'm cisgender, heterosexual, and I enjoy pegging. And so pegging is when their partners are using an apparatus to stimulate the prostate.
Okay.
That was a good way. That was a good way. Terminology.
Yeah.
I was like, how is it going to get around pegging?
Yeah.
I think that's a great point to make is that Drake was making there. A lot of guys are like, don't touch me there. Like there's this big stigma behind it. And I was a prisoner of that mindset for a long time.
Yeah.
Until I felt it for the first time. And I was like, it's not that bad, you know? Go at it like carefully, like you said. Knowledge is power when it comes to that kind of thing, and find out what you're comfortable with before you introduce something to another partner. Awkwardness when it comes to that.
Well, you just don't want to jump into it in the bedroom, right? That's why we have our scheduled sex talk. Like, hey, I heard this prostate massager is pretty cool, and I'm really interested in it. Would you like to play with me? Would you like to help me? You don't have to. You could go against whatever you think is right, but I'm kind of into it. So I'm going to go to the toy store. I'm going to go online and research the best toys, and I'm going to make sure that I'm going to use water-based lubes, because if I buy a $150 toy and I use silicone-based lubes, I'm going to damage the toy. So I'm going to go get some water-based, and then I'm going to try to figure out if this works for me. You're always welcome to join. Right? Now, when we put it like that, we don't force our partners to participate in things that they do, but they have the place to say, they can hit some curiosity and be like, sure, I want to see you orgasm hard. I read something on there, and if I can do that to you, I'm down.
Mm-hmm.
And what would you say to those people who think, because there are some men who don't want they women to use a toy because they feel like the toy is going to take over or do their job.
And I say, brother, that toy ain't competition. That's your best friend.
Right.
Yeah. Facts.
Because literally, our penises aren't made to stimulate the clitoris from the angle of just penile-vaginal penetration.
Mm-hmm.
Our fingers and our tongues cannot vibrate as fast as a vibrator, right? But if we're interested not only in our own pleasure, but also our partner's pleasure, when we're there's many ways that you can use a vibrator, and you can just introduce one while you're having penetrative sex. And your partner can either hold a vibrator or you can hold a vibrator. Or they have one. I don't know what my rules are on language, but they do have cock rings that have a vibrator.
Oh, you can speak your mind.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
They have a cock ring that has a vibrator on it. And so you can use those as well. And so when you lean in and you start to really want to be a connected lover with your partner by listening to the things that turn them on and how they orgasm, and we oblige that orgasm, it's amazing.
I can dig it.
I have a question that came to mind just now.
Okay.
I remember as being a in my youth, it was all about sex, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as I've gotten older, it hasn't become such an issue, or not an issue, but like something that was on the forefront of my mind.
Yeah.
What's a way to kind of for like older community to like spice it up without? What's the easiest way to reintroduce sex? Because I know as you get older, it becomes less and less of a thing.
Well, I think we're still sexual as we're older and just as horny. I think nature does play a weird thing with us as we get older. Our testosterone as men drop. And then as women are transitioning, then they see a spiking increased sexual. They're like, no, let's go. And their husbands are like, bro,
Yeah.
bro, I can't keep up no more. But what we want to go into is back to just redefining what sex is. We don't have to have penile vaginal intercourse to be sexy and to engage with each other. And we also can gift orgasms as well.
What do you mean by that? I'm sorry.
Yeah. I teach people to say, hey, you know what? I'm not in the mood for sex, but I'm interested in giving you an orgasm. Can I grab a toy? Can I go down on you? What can I do to help you get to the place where you want to get to? And it doesn't have to be reciprocal. And that's some things that people don't understand, that it doesn't always have to be reciprocal. It's more fun when it's reciprocal, but it doesn't always have to be. So if I came home and my partner was like, hey, I'm ready to go. And I'm like, dude, I talked about trauma all day. My brain isn't even there.
Yeah.
Right? But while we're sitting down and we're watching Power, if you want an orgasm, I can grab this toy out real quick and help you out. And rub your legs while we're Netflixing and chilling. And then cuddle her after she's orgasmed.
That's cool. He fell out, he'll be back. No, but that is good. I never even thought of that like that.
Yeah.
That is really, really interesting. Guys, I'm going to encourage you to ask your questions in the chat to Mr. Kelvin. He'll probably answer your questions if you put them in the chat. But no, that is a really interesting way to think about it, because I never really thought about gift and sex, or that it can even be done.
Yeah. Well, because we've gotten around this thing that I big proponent for consent. And we go to this part of consent that we say is enthusiastic consent. Well, we don't take in mind when we talk about enthusiastic consent is people that are trying to have kids. They ain't trying to have sex. They're not enthusiastic about it. They're just like on the time clock.
Yeah.
Then we have people part of the asexual community that we call ace gray, who sex doesn't come up to the top of their brain, but if their partner says, hey, you want to have sex? And they're like, yeah, sure. Okay. We can go into it. It's not a big parade. And then like the instance that I just gave you is like, hey, I'm not interested in having sex, but I'm interested in giving you an orgasm if that's what you would like. And so some people be like, yeah, that's amazing. My partner is going to show up for me in this space. Right. Yeah. But I don't have to, I'm not jumping up and down, waving pom-poms and things like that. And it's not a bad thing. We're not taking advantage of anyone in this space. And I think that's the real crux of it. If we're being coerced in giving a blowjob, coerced in doing these things, then that's a bad way to go. But what we're doing is offering and gifting this without any obligation to do so. We don't have to, but I'm going to ask you, would you like one?
I like that. Okay. Wait, somebody got a question for you.
All right.
Let me ask you something. I've never been through this and I've never done this. But if you masturbate every single day for like 20 years, would you be able to lose any seeds for men or eggs for ladies?
Not at all. That is a myth. Women are born with all the eggs that they'll ever need, and an orgasm isn't going to deplete any eggs. And as for sperm, we're going to be able to now. It's depending though. Your sperm volume will decrease. And so, if you're trying to have a kid and you're masturbating every day and then you're trying to have a baby, then that can cause some problems with fertility because your sperm volume has decreased. Now, giving your body some rest and you're not ejaculating as much and you're slowing down so you can have a kid, then you can increase your volume. Yeah. So but as far as you being able to produce viable sperm, it won't have a impact on, or masturbation won't have an impact on that, unless you're doing some rough masturbation that's causing medical issues.
Oh, that's deep. If you're doing that kind of masturbating.
Yeah.
It's a big three. Oh, Christ. A question. I had a minor technical difficulty there,
No
so I
worries.
apologize. But another question is that came to my mind when you were talking is how do we make that education better for like parents? Because I know certain parents avoid the sexual conversation like it's a plague. So, what's a way for them to better educate themselves to make it less of an awkward situation when they're having a conversation with their kids?
Yeah, I would lean into, as with everything, Black women lead the way with everything, right? And so there are amazing Black sex educators who are women that are ASEX certified Black sex educators. Dr. Lex Brown, she is phenomenal. She is the president or the elected president for ASECT, American Association for Sex Education, Counselors, and Therapy. And she does tons of work just on her Instagram and TikToks about talking, and she even talks about sexuality as she's raising her own kids, of how to be sex positive parenting. And having sex positive parenting is amazing for helping kids grow up with the proper education that they have. And when we talk to our kids about sex, everything has to be age appropriate, right? I'm not talking to my 3 or 4-year-old about penetration. What I'm talking to them about is, and I'm using correct words, I'm saying this is your penis, this is your vulva, because I used to work with Alaska Cares, or I was with them with kids that had been sexually assaulted. And they're usually sexually assaulted by someone that they know, and they make a game out of it. You're more likely to be sexually assaulted if, like, oh, Uncle JoJo's going to get your TT, right?
Mm-hmm.
We turn it into a game. We turn it into hide and seek. And that's how these kids get assaulted. But if this kid says, hey, my mom said you can't touch my penis, people back away.
Mm-hmm.
Predators back away because they know you're having that conversation. They're not using the parents' shame and guilt as a weapon towards their kids.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So how to increase sex education, start there. Find some great books on how to talk to our kids about sex. As kids move into teenage years, there's a great magazine called Scarlet Teen that
The Scarlet Teen.
Okay. That helps, that talks about things that kids may face as teenagers when sex comes up.
Yeah, because nowadays I can imagine it wasn't as intense as it was when I was a kid, or I
Mhm.
can imagine when you were a kid. But like kids now deal with a whole bunch of stimulation, so I can imagine it gets a little out of hand, a little too much to deal with when it
Yeah.
comes to certain things. So my question is, besides the sexual education and using proper terminology when you're talking to your kids, um, what's a good way for the parents to feel not only self assured but confident in the way they're going about giving that information out?
Yeah, educating themselves. Taking a sex
Mhm.
one-on-one class for adults is amazing, and especially, and like I said, tap it into some of these sex educators that do teach parents on how to have these conversations with their kids. I went to Amsterdam about 2 years ago to study sex over abroad. And one of the interesting things is that they don't give their kids permission slips in order to talk about sex. They invite the parents into the school,
Okay.
they feed them, give them coffee, and then they teach what they're going to teach to their kids to the parents. So then that way, if the parents have any objections or anything that wasn't that doesn't line up for them, they kind of modify it so it's still teachable. But
Mhm.
the parents can also answer questions when the kids come home and have questions. And I thought that was just brilliant because right now in our system, here's a permission slip. We're going to talk about the birds and the bees. We're going to talk about fallopian
Yeah.
tubes and all of this. And if you don't sign it, your kid's going to have to sit in math class for the rest of the day, right? Which is crazy. We
Yeah,
should be inviting parents to understand what we're teaching their kids.
absolutely. I agree. Sex positivity should be taught, period. Whether at school or at home, children should know the correct information and terminology in a safe space to ask questions.
For sure. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Um, and a lot of people think that sex positivity is not adherent, and especially from what I've seen in the Black community, is that sometimes sex positivity doesn't align with my Christian or religious values. That's not true. Sex positivity isn't saying go out and do all these things. What sex
Mhm.
positivity is I'm making a safe space for you. I'm not going to shame you for your questions. I've worked on my own shame and guilt,
Mm.
all the things that I've gone through, all those messages I've had in my head, I've worked on those. So then that way I can arm my family with a space that's kind, caring, and positive around sex.
Okay. So it's safe to say, though, that everybody probably should seek some type of therapy when it comes to sex because we wasn't really taught properly for the longest of time. So we have to educate ourselves to be able to get, you know, to where we should be and be comfortable and confident within our sexuality.
Yeah, I would say align yourself with sex positive people because I know. So I live here in Colorado, and but my practice is in Alaska. There's not a lot of Black therapists up there, and everyone wants a Black therapist. I can't give that to you because I'm booked out. And so what I do say is line yourself up with a therapist that's sex positive and knowledgeable. So then that way we can find things to help us grow personally because one, all therapists aren't great therapists. They're just not.
So what would you say you should look out for when you're going to search for these sex positive therapists?
How they feel about the LGBT community, what's their cultural and multicultural background, have they done the training, am I going to come into therapy and say, and I get this a lot still even in 2023, into 2010 2023, hey, I told my therapist that I was poly, they told me that they couldn't help me.
Hmm.
And so, or in consensual non-monogamous relationships, they said, or this is against God's work. And so, when you start to find a therapist that's putting their own stuff into therapy, then you're in the wrong therapist
Hmm.
office. When we're, and what I mean by that is when we're putting our own religious beliefs or societal beliefs in there, except for um, a humanistic belief. We all have the right to be healthy, happy, and sound. We all have the right to be in a sex positive environment. And so if they can lean into those beliefs, then yeah, that's the right therapist.
Okay.
But you do have to search. Remember, therapy is just like any other consumer product. You don't have to stick with the therapist if you don't want to. Shop around, ask them questions, get if they have to meet your template. And if they don't, that's cool. I'll tell my clients all the time, if I'm not everybody's cup of tea, if you don't like me, that's cool. Don't ghost me, because I may be able to find somebody that'll help fit your personal requirements, because I can go through other channels that you don't have.
Right. Mr. Keith says, does the difference is in moan or talking has anything to do with busting a nut when you have a stroke?
I haven't seen any research on that. I have seen that, especially with penis owners, men, that moaning, people are very, men are very auditory people.
Mhm.
And so when we hear those, that gives us a signal that we're doing a good job, or we're having the sex that we're having. However, some women fake orgasms early in the relationship and they're moaning for no reason. So they're teaching men that we're doing a good job, and they doom themselves to bad sex for a long time.
That makes sense. He say, back to the masturbation question. Is it okay if you masturbate every day, and if it is okay if you bust a nut but don't nothing come out? Asking for a friend.
Yeah. So sometimes there can be a medical issue there. It's called, I forgot, retrograde ejaculation, where a lot of times that you may not have ejaculate. Now, ejaculation is different from an orgasm, right? Ejaculation is when we're is when that is when we're shooting out semen or seminal fluid. There's a lot of people that can have dry ejaculations and they're not having an orgasm. You can have a wet dream and have ejaculation fluid and not have an orgasm. So those are two different things. So, but I would go check with your doctor if that's happening on a regular basis, because sometimes it's coming back inside of your body. However, there's also tantra practitioners that teach you how to have like a spiritual orgasm but not have an ejaculation. And so we're holding ourselves and having that orgasm, and so we can continue on with sex, but sometimes that's also aligned with edging.
Okay. And somebody wants to know, are there many therapists that counsel?
In America.
Yeah.
It's becoming more and more for us to do so. There's still an old guard of therapists that believe monogamy is the best way of having a relationship, though the research doesn't bear that out. The research says monogamous and consensual non-monogamous relationships show about the same relationship satisfaction, except for consensual non-monogamous relationships tend to have better sexual satisfaction in those relationships. But there are more and more therapists that are becoming very skilled at doing that work. And here in Colorado Springs, there's quite a few, or Colorado just in general, there's quite a few that are skilled in consensual non-monogamy. And I do say consensual non-monogamy because in the therapy world and the research world, we tend to say consensual non-monogamy because that's the most basic things that have to be met, is that everyone is consenting in the relationship. Ethical non-monogamy, sometimes we're talking about people's own ethics, and sometimes ethics don't line up with other people's ethics. Some people like thruples, some people like hierarchical poly, and that's where they go with it. And so it may not line up with everyone else's, but yeah.
Okay. That is awesome. You've been amazing. If somebody wanted you to be their sex therapist, do you offer virtual therapy, or do you just offer it in Colorado?
So my practice is still in Alaska. And so you would have to be in Alaska for me to do sex therapy with you.
Yeah, because it goes state by state, right?
Yeah, even though I live here in the Springs, I lived in Alaska for 20 years. And so since my partner is active duty military, I just kept my practice there. And I don't want to pay Colorado state taxes because we don't pay any in Alaska.
Okay.
There's that.
I ain't mad at you.
But I could, if they want to get in contact with me, I'm on Facebook under K-Pace Counseling. All of my socials are the same, K-Pace Counseling, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. You can reach out to me and I can probably help you find someone that can do the work with you. But like I said, there's only 8 African-American men that are AASECT certified sex therapists. So we're a small pool.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Kelvin.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a pleasure, and I hope to one day have you on here again and get on your nerve and pick your brain.
Anytime.
Honestly, I think like all jokes aside, like you're one of our best guests on the show, and I think the information provided is something that more people need to be comfortable with in the future. So hopefully we can shine a light on that topic. And thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Likewise. And like I said, anytime.
Cool. Yay. I'm glad you said anytime. Y'all heard him. Y'all heard him.
She'll hold you to it.
All right.
I definitely will. But thank you so much. I appreciate you. I'll let you have the rest of your day now to go relax and be with your partner. And just thank you so much. And I'll catch y'all next week. I love you with everything in me. Don't forget to put your crown on. Put your lantern inside your crown and turn that light up and let that light radiate all over your body and through you. Anything that's negative gonna bounce back because you ain't accepting no negativity. And love yourself more than anybody else can. Until next week, guys.
Bye.